Every therapist I know says the same thing. Most of their adult clients are still healing from things their parents said decades ago. But here's the plot twist: parents in 2025 are making the same mistakes, just with a modern flavor. We're dealing with kids who get their self-worth from screen time, compare themselves to filtered photos, and live in a post-pandemic world where anxiety is through the roof. Yet we're still using parenting language from the 1990s. Today I'm counting down 8 phrases that are doing serious damage to our children's mental health. These aren't just outdated, they're actively harmful in ways we're only beginning to understand. Let's start with the most contradictory phrase of our time. Stop being so sensitive, the 2025 edition. Number 8 on our countdown reveals the most mind-boggling contradiction in modern parenting. We're living in 2025, where mental health awareness has reached unprecedented heights. Therapy is trendy, emotional intelligence is taught in schools, and we have apps that track our feelings. Yet somehow, parents are still looking their kids straight in the eye and saying, "Stop being so sensitive," when emotions run high. Here's what makes this particularly absurd in today's world. Generation Z and Generation Alpha are demonstrating emotional intelligence that puts previous generations to shame. These kids can identify complex emotions, understand triggers, and articulate their feelings in ways that would make seasoned therapists proud. They've grown up with emotional vocabulary that many adults still struggle to use. But when they actually exercise this emotional intelligence, we shut them down with the same phrase our grandparents used. We're essentially telling emotionally advanced kids to dial it back to 1950s emotional suppression levels. The modern reality makes this phrase even more damaging than it was decades ago. Today's children navigate cyberbullying that follows them home through their devices. They scroll through social media feeds filled with unrealistic standards and constant comparison. They worry about climate change, school shootings, and global instability in ways previous generations never had to consider. Their heightened emotional responses aren't character flaws or signs of weakness. They're actually adaptive responses to genuinely overwhelming circumstances. When a 12-year-old gets upset about mean comments on their Instagram post, dismissing that as oversensitivity completely misses the point that their social world exists in spaces we barely understand. Recent studies from 2024 and early 2025 reveal something fascinating about children labeled as too sensitive throughout their childhoods. These kids consistently develop superior empathy skills as adults. They become better leaders, more supportive friends, and more emotionally available parents than their peers who learn to suppress feelings early. They can read rooms, understand unspoken tensions, and respond to others' emotional needs with remarkable accuracy. The sensitivity we try to crush out of them becomes their greatest professional and personal asset. Picture this scenario. Your kid comes home upset because someone made fun of their TikTok dance video, and you respond with "Stop being so sensitive." Meanwhile, that same video has been shared in group chats with laughing emojis, screenshot and posted to other platforms, and viewed by hundreds of their classmates. The social humiliation is real, immediate, and far-reaching. But sure, tell them they're overreacting to having their dignity destroyed in high definition and preserved forever on the internet. The disconnect between what kids experience and what adults understand has never been wider. When we repeatedly tell children to stop being sensitive, we create adults who can't access their emotions properly. They grow up learning that feelings are inconvenient, that emotional responses are character defects, and that survival depends on numbing out when things get difficult. Fast forward 20 years, and these adults sit in therapy sessions trying to reconnect with emotions they were trained to ignore. They struggle in relationships because they can't identify when they're hurt, angry, or afraid. They make poor decisions because they've lost touch with their emotional guidance system. The contrast with children who grow up hearing "your feelings matter" couldn't be more dramatic. These kids learn that emotions provide valuable information about their environment and relationships. They develop healthy coping strategies instead of suppression techniques. When challenges arise, they can identify what they're feeling and why, then take appropriate action. They don't become more fragile or dramatic as adults. They become more resilient because they have a full emotional toolkit to work with instead of just gritting their teeth and hoping problems disappear. The alternative to "stop being so sensitive" requires more effort but creates infinitely better outcomes. Try saying, "I can see you're really upset. Help me understand what's happening" instead. This simple shift accomplishes several important things simultaneously. It validates their emotional experience, which teaches them that their feelings are legitimate and worth paying attention to. It positions you as an ally rather than an opponent in their emotional experience. Most importantly, it opens up conversation instead of shutting it down, giving you actual information about what's bothering them instead of forcing them to suffer in silence. Current research shows that children who receive consistent emotional validation throughout childhood show significantly lower rates of anxiety and depression as teenagers and adults. The National Institute of Mental Health released data in late 2024 showing that emotional validation in early childhood reduces the likelihood of developing anxiety disorders by 37% and decreases depression rates by 41% in adolescents. These aren't small improvements. We are talking about substantially different life trajectories based on whether parents validate or dismiss emotional expressions. Here's the truth that might surprise parents stuck in old-school thinking. Sensitivity is actually a superpower in 2025's emotionally complex world. The job market increasingly values emotional intelligence, collaboration skills, and the ability to understand diverse perspectives. The sensitive kid who learned to harness their emotional awareness often becomes the team leader who can navigate conflicts, the entrepreneur who understands customer needs intuitively, or the teacher who connects with struggling students. The children entering kindergarten today will graduate high school in 2037. The world they'll inherit will require even more emotional sophistication than what we see now. Artificial intelligence will handle most analytical tasks, leaving humans to focus on creativity, relationship building, and emotional problem solving. The sensitive children we're trying to toughen up today are actually developing the exact skills that will make them successful in tomorrow's world. In a world where children face unprecedented emotional challenges, sensitivity isn't a weakness to overcome. It's an intelligence to develop and celebrate. But sensitivity alone isn't enough if we're still demanding blind obedience from kids who have access to more information than any generation in history. Because I said so meets the information age. Number 7 brings us to a parenting phrase that sounds more ridiculous every year we advance into the digital age. Picture this scenario. Your 10-year-old questions why they can't stay up past 9 on a school night, and you respond with "because I said so." Meanwhile, that same child just spent their afternoon researching marine biology for a school project, fact-checking news articles you shared on Facebook, and explaining to their grandmother how to use video calling software. The disconnect between treating children like they're incapable of understanding reasoning, while they demonstrate advanced critical thinking skills daily, has reached absurd proportions. The modern reality makes this authoritarian approach particularly outdated. Today's children grow up with instant access to information that previous generations could only dream of. They can research any topic within seconds, compare multiple sources, and develop informed opinions about complex subjects. A 12-year-old can explain cryptocurrency mining, discuss climate change data, or analyze the pros and cons of different college majors with remarkable depth. Yet we still expect them to accept parental decisions without question, as if they're living in an era where children were seen and not heard. The contradiction becomes even more apparent when you consider what these kids actually know compared to their parents. Many children today understand technology concepts that leave their parents completely confused. They grasp social media algorithms, can navigate complex video games that require strategic thinking, and often serve as the family's unofficial tech support team. They've grown up as natural researchers who know how to find reliable information and evaluate sources. But when it comes to household rules or family decisions, we suddenly expect them to abandon all critical thinking and accept blind obedience. The phrase "because I said so" hits differently when directed at a child who just used artificial intelligence to help with their homework. These kids are digital natives who approach problems systematically, gather information from multiple sources, and form logical conclusions. They've been trained by their educational environment to ask questions, seek evidence, and think critically about everything they encounter. Then they come home to parents who expect them to turn off this analytical thinking and simply comply with authority. Recent research on authoritarian parenting outcomes in the digital age reveals troubling patterns that didn't exist in previous generations. Children who grow up with "because I said so" as the standard response to their questions develop along two distinct paths. Some become rebellious hackers who use their technical skills to circumvent parental authority through digital means. They find ways around screen time restrictions, create secret social media accounts, and develop elaborate systems for avoiding detection. Others become anxious rule followers who struggle with decision-making because they've never learned to evaluate situations independently. The rebellious path often leads to an adversarial relationship between parents and children that extends well into adulthood. These kids learn that authority figures can't be trusted to provide reasonable explanations for their decisions. They develop skills in circumventing systems rather than working within them. The anxious path creates adults who constantly seek external validation for their choices because they never learn to trust their own judgment. Both outcomes represent failures of the authoritarian approach in an age where children need to develop strong critical thinking skills. This approach also fails to teach children how to navigate the complex world of information and misinformation they encounter daily. Kids today need exceptional critical thinking skills to evaluate everything from news articles to social media posts to peer pressure. When parents consistently refuse to explain their reasoning, children miss crucial opportunities to observe adult decision-making processes. They don't learn how to weigh different factors, consider potential consequences, or make informed choices based on available evidence. The modern approach to parenting recognizes that explaining the reasoning behind rules and decisions builds internal motivation and wisdom rather than mere compliance. When parents take time to explain why certain rules exist, children learn to understand the underlying principles that guide good decision-making. A child who understands that bedtimes exist to ensure adequate sleep for brain development and academic performance is more likely to value sleep throughout their life than a child who simply follows bedtime rules out of fear of punishment. This collaborative approach also prepares children for the realities of adult life, where success depends on understanding complex systems and making informed decisions without constant supervision. Children who grow up understanding the reasoning behind family rules develop better judgment about when rules should be followed and when they need to be adapted to new situations. Data from recent studies shows that collaborative parenting styles produce more innovative and confident adults than authoritarian approaches. Children who grow up in families where reasoning is valued become adults who can think creatively, solve complex problems, and adapt to changing circumstances. They develop internal motivation systems that serve them well in careers that require independent thinking and initiative. Parents who make the effort to explain their reasoning often discover that their children are more cooperative and understanding than they expected. When kids understand the logic behind family rules, they're more likely to follow them willingly and even help enforce them with siblings. This creates a positive cycle where respect and understanding replace conflict and resistance. The key insight for parents navigating this challenge is that we're preparing our children for a world where artificial intelligence will handle routine tasks, leaving humans to focus on creative problem-solving, critical thinking, and complex decision-making. The children who learn to think independently and evaluate information critically will have significant advantages in this future landscape. In an age where information is abundant but wisdom is scarce, we need children who can think for themselves rather than simply obey without question. But thinking independently requires energy and motivation, qualities that become impossible to sustain when children are constantly overwhelmed by impossible expectations. You're so lazy in the burnout generation. Number 6 exposes one of the most backwards labels parents attach to children in 2025. We're living in an era where kids manage academic schedules that would overwhelm most adults, maintain social media presences that require constant attention, participate in multiple extracurricular activities, and navigate family expectations that seem to multiply each year. Yet when these same children struggle to muster energy for household chores or resist getting started on yet another task, parents look at them and declare, "You're so lazy." The reality of childhood in 2025 contradicts everything about the laziness accusation. These kids wake up at 6 in the morning for school, spend 7 hours in classrooms processing complex information, participate in after-school activities, complete hours of homework, maintain Snapchat streaks with dozens of friends, keep up with Instagram posts, respond to group chats, and somehow find time to eat dinner with family. By the time evening arrives, they're running on fumes. But when they collapse on the couch and resist doing the dishes, suddenly they're labeled as lazy. Contradiction becomes apparent when you examine what parents consider evidence of laziness. A child spends 6 hours completing homework assignments, maintains a 3.8 GPA, plays varsity soccer 3 days a week, volunteers at the local animal shelter on weekends, and manages a social media account that requires daily content creation. But ask them to take out the trash after this marathon day, and suddenly they're unmotivated slackers who need to develop better work ethic. Parents scrolling through their phones for hours each evening somehow miss the irony of criticizing children who accomplish more in a single day than many adults manage in a week. Recent research reveals that what parents interpret as laziness is frequently executive dysfunction, emotional overwhelm, or early signs of depression. Children experiencing executive dysfunction struggle with task initiation, time management, and organizational skills despite having normal intelligence and motivation levels. When parents see a child sitting motionless instead of starting their homework, they often assume the child is being lazy. In reality, that child may be experiencing genuine neurological challenges that make it difficult to begin tasks, especially when they're already exhausted from managing multiple competing demands. The post-pandemic world has created a generation of children who carry unprecedented levels of stress and fatigue. These kids lived through global uncertainty during crucial developmental years. They adapted to remote learning, social isolation, and constant changes in routines and expectations. Many developed anxiety disorders, depression, and attention difficulties as direct results of pandemic-related stress. The children we're calling lazy today are often children whose nervous systems are still recovering from collective trauma that adults barely acknowledge. When children labeled as lazy receive this message repeatedly, they internalize shame about their natural need for rest and recovery. They begin to believe that their worth depends on constant productivity and that any moment of pause or reluctance indicates personal failure. This shame follows them into adulthood, where it manifests as workaholism, imposter syndrome, and an inability to recognize their own limitations. Adults who grew up being called lazy often become compulsive overachievers who burn themselves out trying to prove they're not the lazy person their parents said they were. The laziness label also prevents parents from recognizing when children are genuinely overwhelmed and need support rather than criticism. A child who suddenly stops completing assignments may be experiencing depression, anxiety, or learning difficulties that require professional intervention. A child who used to be motivated but now seems listless may be dealing with bullying, social problems, or family stress that they haven't learned how to communicate effectively. When parents jump straight to laziness accusations, they miss opportunities to provide the help and support their children actually need. Experts suggest replacing accusatory language with curious observation. Instead of declaring "you're so lazy," try saying, "I've noticed you've been struggling with motivation. How can I help?" This shift accomplishes several important things. It removes the character judgment from the equation and focuses on specific behaviors that can be addressed. It positions the parent as an ally rather than a critic. Most importantly, it opens up conversation that might reveal underlying issues that need attention. This alternative approach also teaches children to recognize when they're overwhelmed and to seek support rather than pushing through until they collapse. Children who learn to identify their limits and ask for help develop better self-awareness and stress management skills than children who are taught to ignore their needs and push forward regardless of the cost. The truth about today's supposedly lazy children often surprises parents who take time to look beyond surface behaviors. Many of these kids grow up to become entrepreneurs and innovators who understand the value of working smarter rather than harder. They've learned through necessity how to prioritize tasks, manage multiple competing demands, and recognize when they need to rest in order to maintain peak performance. The efficiency skills they develop while managing their overwhelming childhood schedules serve them well in adult careers. Children who are labeled as lazy often possess strong analytical skills that help them identify inefficient systems and develop better approaches to completing tasks. They question whether certain activities are truly necessary and look for ways to accomplish goals with less effort and stress. These skills become valuable in professional environments where innovation and efficiency are prized over blind compliance with outdated systems. The modern workplace increasingly values employees who can manage multiple projects simultaneously, adapt quickly to changing priorities, and maintain productivity while avoiding burnout. Children who learn to pace themselves and recognize their limits often outperform colleagues who learn to ignore their needs and push through exhaustion regardless of the consequences. But perhaps the most outdated parenting phrase of all involves teaching children about scarcity in an age of digital abundance. Money doesn't grow on trees, goes digital. Number 5 reveals how traditional financial messaging has become completely disconnected from modern reality. Parents continue telling their children, money doesn't grow on trees, while those same kids watch teenagers become millionaires by posting dance videos on TikTok. We're teaching kids that money is impossibly hard to earn, while they witness classmates making thousands of dollars from YouTube channels about opening Pokemon cards. The modern irony becomes apparent when you examine what today's children actually understand about money creation. These kids grasp concepts like ad revenue, affiliate marketing, and brand partnerships before they learn basic multiplication tables. They watch content creators turn hobbies into six-figure businesses and see influencers earn more from single sponsored posts than their parents make in months. A 10-year-old can explain how YouTubers monetize their channels through multiple revenue streams, but they're still hearing that earning money requires backbreaking labor and extreme sacrifice. Consider the absurdity of explaining financial scarcity to a generation that has witnessed people become millionaires from viral dances that took 5 minutes to create. These children have seen teenagers purchase houses with money earned from social media, watched gamers make fortunes playing video games, and observed artists sell digital artwork for hundreds of thousands of dollars. The traditional narrative that money is scarce and difficult to obtain conflicts directly with their lived experience of abundance and opportunity in the digital economy. The phrase, "money doesn't grow on trees," instills a scarcity mindset that creates anxiety and fear around financial topics, rather than building genuine financial wisdom. Children who repeatedly hear this message learn to associate money with struggle, stress, and limitation. They develop internal narratives about money being inherently difficult to obtain and maintain. This fear-based approach to financial education creates adults who either avoid money conversations entirely or approach financial decisions from a place of panic rather than informed planning. The updated reality of 2025 contradicts everything about the tree metaphor. Money literally does grow digitally through investments that compound automatically, content creation that generates passive income, and online businesses that scale without traditional overhead costs. Children today need to understand that money can multiply through smart investments, appreciate through digital assets, and generate continuously through automated systems. Today's children require financial education that addresses cryptocurrency, digital assets, and online income streams rather than outdated concepts about physical currency and traditional banking. They need to understand how digital wallets work, how to evaluate investment opportunities in emerging technologies, and how to create multiple income streams using online platforms. The financial literacy they need for success in their adult lives looks completely different from what their parents learned in school. The psychological damage from money shame extends far beyond childhood and creates lasting patterns that affect adult financial behavior. Children who grow up hearing constant messages about money scarcity often develop into adults who exhibit extreme financial behaviors. Some become compulsive spenders who equate purchasing with self-worth and use shopping as emotional regulation. Others transform into extreme penny pinchers who hoard money out of fear and anxiety, unable to enjoy financial security even when they achieve it. These adults often struggle with imposter syndrome in their careers because they internalized messages that financial success is somehow illegitimate or temporary. They may sabotage their own financial growth because deep down they believe they don't deserve prosperity. The shame around money that began in childhood manifests as self-limiting beliefs that prevent them from pursuing opportunities, negotiating fair compensation, or building wealth through investment and entrepreneurship. Modern alternatives to scarcity-based financial messaging focus on teaching actual financial literacy rather than fear-based thinking. Instead of saying money doesn't grow on trees, parents can engage children in conversations about how wealth is created, how different income streams work, and how smart financial decisions compound over time. These conversations should include discussions about budgeting, saving, investing, and creating value for others through products or services. Children benefit from learning about abundance thinking, which recognizes that wealth creation often comes from identifying problems and creating solutions rather than trading time for money in traditional employment. This perspective teaches kids to look for opportunities to add value, solve problems, and create win-win situations rather than viewing financial success as something that requires taking from others or sacrificing their well-being. Research consistently shows that positive money conversations in childhood lead to better financial decisions in adulthood. Children who grow up in households where money is discussed openly and positively develop healthier relationships with financial planning and wealth building. They learn to view money as a tool for creating security and opportunities rather than a source of stress and conflict. The shift toward abundance thinking doesn't mean teaching children that money comes without effort or that financial success is guaranteed. Instead, it means helping them understand that opportunities for wealth creation are abundant for those who develop valuable skills, solve meaningful problems, and make smart financial decisions. This approach teaches children to focus on what they can control and influence rather than feeling powerless in the face of economic forces. Parents who embrace modern financial education help their children develop entrepreneurial thinking and creative problem-solving skills that serve them well in rapidly changing economic environments. These children learn to identify opportunities, evaluate risks, and create value in ways that traditional financial education never addressed. They become adults who adapt quickly to new economic realities and create their own financial security rather than depending solely on traditional employment. In 2025, financial education must focus on developing the mindset and skills that enable children to create wealth rather than just manage scarcity. But even more damaging than outdated financial advice is the way we pit children against each other in an age when they're already drowning in comparison culture. Why can't you be more like your sister in the comparison era? Number 4 reveals how parental comparisons have become exponentially more damaging in our hyperconnected age. These children already spend their days scrolling through endless streams of filtered Instagram photos, watching AI-enhanced TikTok stars with impossible beauty standards, and constantly measuring themselves against curated highlight reels of their peers' lives. Then they come home to parents who look at them and say, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" The amplified damage this creates in today's world should make every parent pause before these words leave their mouth. The comparison pressure children experience in 2025 has reached levels that previous generations never had to navigate. These kids wake up and immediately check social media apps where they see classmates posting perfect morning routines, flawless outfit photos, and achievements that make their own lives feel inadequate by comparison. They scroll through TikTok videos of teenagers with professional lighting, perfect skin filters, and choreographed content that took hours to create but appears effortless. By the time they sit down for breakfast, they've already absorbed dozens of messages about how they should look, act, and perform to be worthy of attention and approval. The absurdity becomes apparent when you consider what parents are actually doing. We're comparing our children to their siblings, while those same children are already comparing themselves to influencers with millions of followers, professional makeup teams, and content creation budgets that exceed most family incomes. A parent might criticize their child for not being as organized as their sister, while that child spent their morning watching lifestyle influencers showcase color-coordinated closets and minimalist bedroom setups that cost more than a car. The sibling comparison feels almost quaint compared to the impossible standards kids absorb from their devices. Recent research reveals that sibling comparisons create lifelong rivalry and self-worth issues that become amplified in our current social media environment. Children who grow up hearing these comparisons develop internal narratives about their value being determined by how they measure against others. In previous generations, this might have been limited to immediate family members or classmates. Today's children carry these comparison frameworks into digital spaces, where the competition includes millions of other children, professional content creators, and artificially enhanced images that represent impossible standards. The psychological impact hits differently when children are already struggling with identity formation in a hyperconnected world. Adolescents today face identity challenges that didn't exist for previous generations. They're trying to figure out who they are while constantly seeing alternative versions of themselves they could become. Social media algorithms feed them content about transformation, improvement, and becoming better versions of themselves. When parents add family-based comparisons to this mix, children receive the message that their current identity isn't acceptable not just to strangers online, but to the people who are supposed to love them unconditionally. Children need their homes to serve as refuges from comparison culture rather than extensions of it. When parents compare siblings, they eliminate the one space where children should feel accepted for who they are rather than judged for who they aren't. The home environment becomes another arena for competition and measurement, rather than a place for authentic self-expression and unconditional support. Comparison-based parenting creates adults who struggle to celebrate others' success without feeling personally diminished. Children who grow up hearing, "Why can't you be more like?" develop zero-sum thinking about achievement and happiness. They learn that someone else's success automatically means their own failure or inadequacy. This mindset carries into adult relationships, workplace dynamics, and parenting approaches with their own children. These adults often become hypercompetitive in professional settings, unable to collaborate effectively because they view colleagues' achievements as threats to their own value. They struggle in friendships when friends experience success because their childhood programming tells them that comparison determines worth. They may become parents who perpetuate the same comparison patterns with their own children because they never learn to value individual uniqueness over relative performance. The alternative to sibling comparisons requires parents to observe and articulate what makes each child unique. Instead of saying, "Why can't you be more like your sister?" try expressing, "I love how you approach problems differently than anyone else." This shift accomplishes several important goals simultaneously. It validates the child's individual approach to life rather than suggesting they should abandon their natural tendencies. It communicates that diversity in approaches is valuable rather than problematic. This language also teaches children to recognize and appreciate their own unique qualities rather than constantly measuring themselves against others. They learn that their value comes from their individual contributions rather than their relative performance compared to siblings or peers. Parents who make this shift often discover strengths in their children they never noticed while focused on comparisons. The child who isn't as academically focused as their sibling might show exceptional creativity, emotional intelligence, or problem-solving skills that were previously overlooked. The less organized child might demonstrate flexibility and adaptability that serves them well in changing circumstances. The truth about raising children in 2025's diverse world is that we need kids who understand their unique value rather than children trying to become carbon copies of others. The future will require diverse perspectives, varied skill sets, and innovative approaches to complex problems. Children who grow up confident in their individual strengths are better positioned to contribute meaningfully to this diverse landscape. The comparison trap that begins with sibling rivalry often expands into lifelong patterns of inadequacy and competition. But even more devastating than comparison is when parents weaponize their own emotional reactions to control their children's behavior. "I'm disappointed in you" hits different now. Number 3 reveals how parental disappointment has become exponentially more damaging in our hyperconnected age. When parents tell their children, "I'm disappointed in you," they're speaking to kids who already face unprecedented performance anxiety from academic pressures, social media perfectionism, and constant comparison culture. These children wake up every morning knowing they'll be measured against impossible standards in school, online, and now at home. The academic environment in 2025 has transformed into a pressure cooker where children compete for increasingly selective college admissions, participate in extracurricular activities requiring professional-level commitment, and maintain grade point averages that determine their perceived worth. Meanwhile, social media amplifies every failure and shortcoming through curated feeds of seemingly perfect peers. When parents add their disappointment to this constant stream of external judgment, children receive the message that even their safest relationships depend on their performance. Consider the impossible emotional load these children carry simultaneously. A teenager might disappoint their parents by earning a B+ in calculus, while simultaneously managing disappointment from 500 followers who didn't engage with their latest post. They're processing criticism from parents, teachers, coaches, peers, and complete strangers online, all while trying to develop their individual identity. This emotional burden would challenge most adults, yet we expect children to handle this pressure while maintaining perfect behavior. Research consistently demonstrates that disappointment statements create perfectionist tendencies and paralyzing fear of failure. When parents express disappointment, they teach children that their value depends on meeting external expectations rather than developing internal worth. These children learn to view mistakes as evidence of personal inadequacy rather than natural parts of learning. The perfectionist mindset that develops from repeated disappointment messages creates adults who cannot take the healthy risks necessary for growth and innovation. This phrase hits particularly hard for children still recovering from post-pandemic social anxiety that has redefined childhood development. Many kids missed crucial social learning experiences during remote schooling and lockdowns. They're still learning to navigate complex social situations and develop confidence in group settings. When parents express disappointment during this vulnerable period, children internalize the message that their struggles represent personal failures rather than natural responses to unprecedented circumstances. The long-term impact creates adults who spend their lives trying to avoid letting others down rather than pursuing their own goals. These adults become people-pleasers who sacrifice their needs to maintain approval from others. They struggle with independent decision-making because they constantly worry about how their choices will be perceived. The fear of disappointing others becomes so overwhelming that they avoid taking risks or pursuing opportunities that might lead to failure. Professional environments suffer when filled with adults who grew up fearing disappointment. These individuals often underperform because they're too afraid of making mistakes to take necessary risks or propose innovative solutions. They may procrastinate on important projects because they're paralyzed by the possibility of producing imperfect work. The fear of disappointing supervisors prevents them from advocating for themselves or contributing unique perspectives to team discussions. Personal relationships also deteriorate when partners grew up with disappointment as primary feedback. These adults interpret normal relationship conflicts as evidence they're failing as partners or friends. They become hypervigilant about their partner's mood changes, constantly worried they've done something wrong. The fear of disappointment prevents them from expressing their own needs because they prioritize avoiding conflict over maintaining healthy boundaries. Disappointment language teaches children that love is conditional on performance, creating lifelong insecurity. When parents express disappointment, children learn that their value depends on meeting expectations rather than being inherently worthy of love. This conditional love creates relationship anxiety because children never feel secure in their worthiness. They grow up believing affection must be earned through achievement rather than given freely. The alternative approach focuses on separating behavior from identity, allowing children to understand that their actions don't define their worth as human beings. Instead of saying, "I'm disappointed in you," parents can express concern about specific behaviors while maintaining love for the child. This might sound like, "I'm concerned about the choice you made, and I know you're capable of better decisions." This language addresses behavior without attacking character or suggesting diminished worth. Growth mindset alternatives recognize that mistakes are learning opportunities rather than evidence of personal inadequacy. When children make poor choices or fail to meet expectations, parents can respond with curiosity rather than judgment. Questions like, "What did you learn from this experience?" or "How might you handle this differently next time?" teach children to view setbacks as information rather than condemnation. This approach builds resilience and problem-solving skills that serve children throughout their lives. Recent studies show that supportive language during failures builds resilience and innovation by teaching children that their worth isn't diminished by mistakes. Children who receive support during difficult times learn to view challenges as opportunities for growth rather than threats to their self-worth. They develop confidence in their ability to handle adversity because they know their support system remains stable regardless of their performance. This security allows them to take healthy risks and pursue ambitious goals without being paralyzed by fear of failure. Children who know they're loved unconditionally develop the internal security necessary to navigate external pressures without being crushed. They learn to separate their worth from their performance, allowing them to pursue goals and take risks without their identity hanging in the balance. In 2025's hyperconnected world, this unconditional love becomes even more crucial as children face unprecedented external judgment and comparison opportunities. But perhaps nothing reveals the generational disconnect more clearly than parents who criticize the very technology they themselves cannot put down. Turn off that screen without understanding digital natives. Number 2 exposes the most hypocritical command in modern parenting. We're telling children to turn off their screens while they watch us scroll through Facebook during dinner, check work emails at family gatherings, and binge Netflix series for hours each evening. These are kids who were born into a digital world, raised on tablets and smartphones, and educated through online platforms during a global pandemic. Yet we treat their relationship with technology like it's an addiction that needs immediate intervention. The fundamental misunderstanding becomes apparent when you examine how children actually use screens in 2025. These aren't mindless zombies staring at flickering lights for entertainment. Today's kids use technology for creative expression through video editing apps and digital art platforms. They collaborate on school projects using shared documents and virtual meeting spaces. They maintain meaningful friendships through gaming platforms where they solve complex problems together. They learn new skills from YouTube tutorials and online courses that often exceed what they receive in traditional classrooms. The assumption that all screen time equals mindless consumption reveals how little parents understand about their children's digital experiences. Recent research shows that teens now spend an average of 8 hours a day on screens, 2 hours more than in 2015, while preteens spend about 5.5 hours daily on devices. But these statistics mean nothing without context about what they're actually doing during that time. When parents hear these numbers, they imagine children staring blankly at screens for hours without purpose. The reality involves homework completion, creative projects, social interaction, skill development, and educational content consumption that happens to occur through digital interfaces. The irony deepens when you consider that parents use technology for the same purposes they criticize in their children. Adults check social media for entertainment and connection. They stream movies and shows for relaxation. They use devices for work, communication, and information gathering. Yet when children engage in similar activities through age-appropriate platforms, suddenly it becomes problematic behavior that requires immediate correction. The double standard teaches children that technology is inherently bad for them, but perfectly acceptable for adults. The blanket screen shaming approach creates shame around technology instead of teaching healthy digital habits that children actually need. When parents consistently treat screen time as inherently negative, children learn to hide their digital activities rather than seeking guidance about online experiences. They develop secretive relationships with technology because they know their parents view their digital engagement as problematic regardless of its purpose or value. This secrecy prevents parents from understanding what their children encounter online and eliminates opportunities for meaningful conversations about digital citizenship. The shame-based approach also misses crucial opportunities to teach children how to evaluate online content, recognize misinformation, and develop critical thinking skills about digital media. Children who feel ashamed about their screen use are less likely to ask parents for help when they encounter cyberbullying, inappropriate content, or online predators. The very approach designed to protect children from digital dangers actually increases their vulnerability by destroying the trust and communication necessary for effective guidance. Research demonstrates that screen-shaming language makes children secretive about their digital lives instead of encouraging open communication about online experiences. When parents consistently express disapproval about screen time, children learn to hide their online activities to avoid conflict and criticism. This secrecy prevents parents from understanding the digital challenges their children face and eliminates opportunities to provide support when problems arise. The collaborative approach involves understanding what children are doing online and why, rather than making assumptions based on fear or incomplete information. Parents who take time to learn about their children's digital activities often discover that much of their screen time involves meaningful engagement rather than passive consumption. They might find children learning programming through interactive games, developing artistic skills through digital design programs, or maintaining important friendships through online communication platforms. This understanding allows parents to provide relevant guidance about healthy technology use rather than blanket prohibitions that ignore the realities of digital life. Children benefit from conversations about balancing online and offline activities, recognizing when screen time becomes compulsive rather than purposeful, and developing skills for managing digital overwhelm. These conversations require parents to understand the digital landscape rather than simply fearing it. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that children ages 2 to 5 limit screen time to about 1 hour per weekday and 3 hours on weekend days, while children 5 and older should limit recreational screen time to no more than 2 hours daily, with parental engagement in what is being viewed. These guidelines recognize that technology can be beneficial when used appropriately, while acknowledging the need for limits and supervision. The key insight involves recognizing that screens themselves aren't the enemy. Poor boundaries and lack of digital literacy education create the problems parents associate with screen time. Children need guidance about when, how, and why to use technology rather than shame about engaging with digital tools that will be central to their adult lives. The University of Wollongong found that parents' use of technology in their child's presence was associated with poorer cognition and social behavior outcomes and increased screen time among young children. This research highlights the importance of mindful technology use by adults rather than focusing solely on children's screen habits. Parents who model healthy technology use while remaining present and engaged with their children create better outcomes than parents who simply restrict children's access while maintaining their own unlimited screen habits. The truth about managing technology in 2025 families is that collaboration works better than prohibition. Children who participate in family discussions about technology develop better self-regulation skills than children who simply follow imposed restrictions. They learn to recognize when their screen time serves their goals and when it becomes mindless distraction. But perhaps the most backwards response parents can give involves dismissing the very emotional intelligence that makes this generation remarkable. You're being dramatic to the mental health generation. Number 1 reveals the cruelest irony in modern parenting. We're living in 2025, where mental health awareness has become mainstream, therapy is normalized, and emotional vocabulary is taught in elementary schools. These children can identify complex feelings, recognize triggers, and articulate their emotional experiences with remarkable precision. Yet when they exercise this emotional sophistication, parents look at them and say, "You're being dramatic." The modern reality shows us children who are genuinely better at identifying and expressing their emotions than most adults, but parents consistently misinterpret this competence as theatrical behavior. Today's kids grow up learning about anxiety, depression, trauma responses, and emotional regulation in ways that previous generations never encountered. They understand concepts like triggers, boundaries, and emotional processing that many adults still struggle to grasp. When these emotionally literate children express their feelings accurately and specifically, parents who lack this same vocabulary often dismiss their communication as overdramatic rather than recognizing it as sophisticated emotional intelligence. Consider the absurdity of adult behavior compared to what we label as dramatic in children. Parents call kids dramatic for crying about friendship conflicts, while those same adults have complete meltdowns when the Wi-Fi password doesn't work. We label children as overly emotional for expressing sadness about pet deaths, while adults scream at customer service representatives over minor inconveniences. The double standard reveals that adults often lack the emotional regulation skills they expect children to demonstrate effortlessly. These children navigate unprecedented stressors that would challenge most adults. They process cyberbullying that follows them home through their devices, cope with global tragedies through social media feeds that expose them to violence and suffering from around the world, and manage academic pressures that have intensified dramatically since their parents were students. They handle social dynamics both online and offline that create complexity previous generations never faced. When they express appropriate emotional responses to genuinely overwhelming circumstances, calling them dramatic completely misses the reality of their experiences. Research consistently demonstrates that emotional expression in childhood serves crucial functions for mental health development. The CDC estimated that nearly 1 in 5 young children in the United States are affected by mental health difficulties, with around a third of individuals worldwide with mental disorders experiencing their first onset before age 14. These statistics reveal that children's emotional expressions often reflect real struggles rather than attention-seeking behavior. When parents dismiss these expressions as drama, they potentially ignore early warning signs of serious mental health challenges that require professional attention. The phrase, "you're being dramatic," becomes particularly harmful when directed at children who are dealing with actual anxiety, depression, or trauma responses. Many children today carry diagnoses that previous generations either didn't recognize or refused to acknowledge. These kids understand their conditions, recognize their symptoms, and attempt to communicate their experiences to parents who should serve as their primary support systems. When parents respond with dismissal rather than validation, children learn that their mental health struggles are burdens rather than conditions that deserve care and understanding. The dismissal of emotions teaches children to suppress feelings rather than process them healthily, creating long-term mental health consequences that extend into adulthood. Children who repeatedly hear that their emotional expressions are dramatic learn to internalize their struggles rather than seeking support when they need it most. They develop shame around their natural emotional responses and begin to view their feelings as character defects rather than normal human experiences. This suppression creates adults who struggle with emotional regulation, have difficulty maintaining relationships, and often experience delayed mental health crises in their 20s and 30s. Research published in Psychological Bulletin in 2025 by the American Psychological Association found that children experiencing socio-emotional problems were more likely to turn to screens as coping mechanisms. The study noted that kids who use screens heavily might need emotional support, not just restrictions. This research highlights the importance of addressing underlying emotional needs rather than simply dismissing expressions as dramatic. Validation techniques that acknowledge emotions while teaching regulation skills create much better outcomes than dismissive approaches. Instead of saying, "you're being dramatic," parents can respond with phrases like, "I can see you're really upset. Can you help me understand what's happening?" This approach validates the child's emotional experience while gathering information about what's actually causing distress. It teaches children that their emotions provide valuable information about their environment and relationships, rather than serving as inconveniences that need to be minimized. These validation approaches also model healthy emotional processing for children who are still learning how to manage complex feelings. When parents respond to emotional expressions with curiosity rather than judgment, children learn that feelings can be explored, understood, and managed rather than suppressed or eliminated. They develop confidence in their emotional experiences and trust that their support systems will help them navigate difficult feelings rather than dismissing them as problematic. Data consistently shows that emotional validation in childhood prevents mental health crises during adolescence and adulthood. Children who grow up in environments where emotions are acknowledged and supported develop better stress management skills, stronger relationships, and lower rates of anxiety and depression. They learn to view emotional challenges as temporary experiences that can be addressed rather than permanent character defects that define their worth. What we dismiss as drama today often becomes tomorrow's therapy topics, relationship struggles, and mental health challenges that could have been prevented with appropriate validation and support during childhood. But even the most emotionally devastating phrase pales in comparison to words that attack the very foundation of a child's existence. "I wish I never had kids," the ultimate damage. Most devastating words a parent can speak attack the very foundation of a child's right to exist. "I wish I never had kids" represents complete rejection of a child's existence and worth. Unlike other harmful phrases that criticize behavior or performance, this statement attacks the fundamental right of the child to exist and be loved. The gravity of these words cannot be overstated because they communicate that the child's very presence in the world is a mistake that the parent regrets making. The emotional sophistication of children in 2025 makes this phrase exponentially more destructive than it was for previous generations. Today's kids possess heightened emotional awareness and advanced vocabulary for describing their feelings. They understand concepts like rejection, abandonment, and conditional love with startling clarity. When parents say they wish they never had children, these emotionally intelligent kids don't just hear momentary frustration. They internalize a complete rejection of their identity and place in the family. Their advanced emotional processing means they fully comprehend the implications of what their parents are communicating. The contradiction becomes apparent when you examine parents' private expressions of regret versus their public celebration of parenthood. These same parents who declare they wish their children never existed spend hours curating perfect family photos for Instagram. They post adorable videos of their kids on TikTok, while simultaneously harboring and expressing resentment about those same children's existence. They share parenting memes about how much they love being parents, while privately telling their children they regret having them. The cognitive dissonance reveals how parents often use social media to create fictional versions of their family experiences. Research consistently demonstrates that rejection statements create attachment disorders and profound self-worth issues that persist throughout the child's lifetime. Children who hear that their parents wish they were never born develop what psychologists call existential shame, a deep belief that their very existence is problematic. This type of shame goes beyond behavioral shame or performance shame. It attacks the core of who they are as human beings. Studies show that children who experience this level of rejection struggle with attachment security, meaning they have difficulty trusting that other people will remain committed to relationships with them. The statement often erupts during moments of parental burnout, but it creates permanent emotional scars that far exceed the temporary frustration that prompted it. Parents typically say these words when they feel overwhelmed by the responsibilities and challenges of raising children. They might be dealing with sleepless nights, behavioral problems, financial stress, or the loss of personal freedom that accompanies parenthood. In moments of exhaustion and frustration, they lash out with the most hurtful words they can find. However, these momentary expressions of regret become defining experiences for children who carry them as core beliefs about their worth. The modern context makes parental burnout more intense than previous generations experienced. Parents in 2025 face unprecedented challenges that contribute to feelings of overwhelm and regret. Work-life balance has become increasingly difficult as technology erases boundaries between professional and personal time. Financial stress affects more families as living costs rise faster than wages. Social media creates constant pressure to appear successful and happy while privately struggling with parenting challenges. The US Surgeon General's warning about parental stress identified time demands and cultural pressures as critical factors contributing to parental overwhelm. These pressures create environments where parents feel trapped and resentful about their circumstances. They may love their children while simultaneously feeling angry about the sacrifices parenthood has required. When this resentment builds without proper outlets or support systems, it eventually explodes in statements like, "I wish I never had kids." The problem is that temporary adult emotions become permanent childhood trauma when expressed directly to the children who didn't choose to be born. The long-term impact creates adults who struggle profoundly with feeling worthy of love and belonging throughout their lives. Children who internalize parental rejection develop what researchers call chronic unworthiness, a persistent belief that they don't deserve care, attention, or affection from others. These adults often sabotage relationships because they expect eventual abandonment. They may become people pleasers who exhaust themselves trying to earn love they believe they don't naturally deserve. Others become emotionally distant to protect themselves from the pain of potential rejection. Professional therapy often becomes necessary for adults who grew up hearing that their parents wished they were never born. These individuals typically require years of therapeutic work to develop healthy relationships and positive self-regard. The financial and emotional costs of repairing this damage far exceed the momentary relief parents might feel from expressing their frustration directly to their children. Alternatives for expressing parental overwhelm exist that don't involve rejecting the child's existence or worth. Parents can say, "I'm feeling overwhelmed right now and need some space to calm down," instead of wishing their children didn't exist. This approach acknowledges the parent's emotional state without making the child responsible for causing or fixing it. Other alternatives include, "I'm struggling with some grown-up problems right now, but they're not your fault," or "I need to take care of myself so I can be a better parent to you." These alternatives teach children that adults have emotions and limitations without suggesting that the children are burdens or mistakes. They model healthy emotional expression and self-awareness while maintaining the child's sense of security and belonging within the family. The responsibility for managing adult emotions belongs to adults, not children. Parents who feel overwhelmed need to seek appropriate help from other adults rather than expressing their frustration to the children who depend on them for security and stability. This might involve asking family members for help, hiring childcare assistants, joining parenting support groups, or pursuing individual therapy to address underlying issues contributing to parental stress. The ultimate truth about this phrase is that parents need help and support, but children should never pay the price for adult struggles. Parental regret is a normal human emotion that many parents experience during challenging phases of child-rearing. However, expressing this regret directly to children transforms a normal adult emotion into childhood trauma. The children who hear these words carry them as core beliefs about their worth and place in the world, often requiring decades of healing to overcome the damage. Understanding the profound impact of these harmful phrases is the first step toward creating healthier family communication patterns. The awareness of how deeply words can wound opens the door to discovering more effective approaches to parenting challenges. The Modern Parent's Toolkit for 2025. Building healthier family communication starts with understanding that parenting in 2025 requires completely different skills than what worked for previous generations. We're raising digital natives who face challenges that didn't exist 20 years ago. These children need parents who understand their world, rather than trying to force them into outdated frameworks that no longer apply. Conscious parenting begins with recognizing that children today are complex individuals navigating unprecedented social, academic, and digital pressures while their brains are still developing. This approach requires parents to understand child development, recognize their own triggers and limitations, and respond to their children based on what those specific children need rather than what worked in the past or what looks good on social media. The language alternatives we use create completely different outcomes than the harmful phrases we've examined. Instead of "stop being so sensitive," try "your feelings make sense given what you're going through." Rather than "because I said so," explain "here's why this rule exists and how it helps keep you safe." When you're tempted to say "you're so lazy," consider "I notice you're struggling to get started. What's making this difficult?" These shifts require more effort from parents, but they build connection instead of creating distance between family members. Emotional regulation becomes crucial because children learn more from what they observe than what they're told. Parents who model healthy responses to frustration, disappointment, and overwhelm teach their children how to handle these same emotions effectively. This becomes particularly important in the social media age, where children see curated versions of other families and may wonder why their own family experiences normal conflicts and challenges. Modern parenting research consistently supports collaborative and respectful approaches over authoritarian methods. Studies show that children who grow up in families where their opinions are valued and their emotions are acknowledged develop better decision-making skills, stronger relationships, and higher levels of emotional intelligence. They also show lower rates of anxiety, depression, and behavioral problems compared to children raised with strict authoritarian approaches. The technology piece requires parents to educate themselves about the digital landscape their children navigate daily. This means understanding the platforms children use, the games they play, and the social dynamics that exist in online spaces. Parents don't need to become experts in every app or platform, but they need enough knowledge to have meaningful conversations about digital citizenship, online safety, and healthy technology use. Managing emotions in 2025 families requires understanding that children today face emotional challenges that previous generations never encountered. They need validation for their responses to cyberbullying, social media pressure, academic stress, and global uncertainty. They benefit from parents who can help them identify emotions, understand triggers, and develop healthy coping strategies. This doesn't mean protecting children from all difficult emotions, but rather teaching them that emotions provide valuable information and can be managed effectively. Behavioral challenges in modern families often stem from children feeling misunderstood, overwhelmed, or disconnected from their parents. The collaborative approach focuses on understanding the underlying needs behind challenging behaviors rather than simply trying to eliminate the behaviors through punishment or control. Children who feel heard and understood are more likely to cooperate and less likely to act out in destructive ways. Community-focused parenting reflects recognition that raising children in isolation creates unnecessary stress for families. Parents benefit from connecting with other families, sharing resources, and creating support networks that help during challenging periods. This might involve forming parenting pods, joining community groups, or simply developing friendships with other parents who understand the unique challenges of raising children in 2025. Digital wellness practices become essential for modern families. Setting boundaries around technology use, creating tech-free zones and times, and modeling healthy digital habits help children develop positive relationships with technology. This doesn't mean eliminating screens entirely, but rather teaching intentional use and maintaining balance between online and offline activities. Mental health awareness has become central to effective parenting in 2025. Parents need to understand that supporting their children's emotional well-being is just as important as supporting their physical health or academic achievement. This might involve allowing mental health days, teaching emotional regulation skills, and seeking professional help when children show signs of anxiety, depression, or other mental health challenges. The inclusivity trend recognizes that children benefit from environments where they can explore their identities without being constrained by outdated stereotypes. This involves using gender-neutral language when appropriate, offering diverse toys and activities, and supporting children as they discover their own interests and identities rather than forcing them into predetermined roles. The independence-building approach teaches children life skills and decision-making abilities that serve them throughout their lives. This might involve age-appropriate responsibilities, opportunities to solve problems independently, and gradually increasing freedoms as children demonstrate readiness for more autonomy. The empowering truth for parents is that it's never too late to change communication patterns with children. Kids are remarkably resilient and forgiving when parents make genuine efforts to improve their relationships. Acknowledging past mistakes, apologizing when appropriate, and demonstrating consistent changes in behavior can heal damage and create stronger connections between family members. The tools and approaches we've discussed require practice and patience, but they create family environments where children can develop into emotionally healthy, confident adults who are prepared for whatever challenges they encounter in their futures. The investment parents make in learning these skills pays dividends, not just in improved family relationships, but in raising children who will become emotionally intelligent, resilient adults capable of creating positive change in the world. What makes this transformation possible is understanding the profound impact our daily interactions have on shaping who our children become. The research is clear: our words become our children's inner voice. Every phrase we speak to them today becomes part of the internal dialogue they'll carry for decades. In 2025, we have an unprecedented opportunity to give our children kinder, more supportive conversations with themselves. Think about the voices from your own childhood that still play in your head. Which ones help you through difficult times, and which ones hold you back? Now imagine giving your children only the helpful voices. That's the power we hold as parents. But this transformation requires action from all of us. Comment below with one harmful phrase you're committed to changing in your own family. Share the language you'll use instead. Your experience might help another parent make this crucial shift. Start today with one phrase you'll replace, and watch how your child's inner voice changes for the better.